All right, welcome everybody. We're going to spend a little time today together to talk about how do you budget as a family, right? A lot of people don't think about um, budgeting as a family affair. It's typically one person in the household is primarily responsible, but there's a great opportunity to talk about how to budget as a family and really solidify those family goals and just really get the buy-in from everybody as to why we're doing things or why we're spending money the way that we do. So I wanted to kick things off with just talking about what our objectives are today. So I want to focus on three things. I want to talk about how do you actually set financial goals as a family, and how do you teach kids about money? How do you talk to kids about money? And then one of my favorite budgeting hacks is called revolving savings, and I'll show you what that is and how you could implement one for yourself if you haven't heard of that term before. And then it's always a good time when we're trying to make uh, make goals. Typically, we have to make adjustments and we have to prioritize what's important. And so, if you do have a savings goal for something, like maybe it is a summer activity or a vacation with your family, I was just going to give you a couple of strategic tools to help you with how to strategize some areas where you might be able to spend a little bit less so that you have more for other things. So first off, I wanted to have a quick poll and see if I can, if you can launch that poll for me. I'm also going to have it here on the slide. I would just like to kind of know where we're all feeling, and it's just a degree of I disagree or I agree. The first question is 0 meaning you disagree and 5 meaning you highly agree. Did your parents teach you about money principles when you were growing up? The second question is, do you feel that teaching children about money is difficult? And then the third and last question is, do you agree or disagree that children learn most of what they need to know about money while they're at school? Okay, I'm just going to give a few more seconds for you to complete that poll, and then we can end the poll. And of course, the poll is anonymous, so don't know who answers what, but I might ask a question of the group. All right, so I'm looking at the results. And so kind of in the middle, about 75% of you were kind of middle of the road of parents taught me about money principles when I was growing up. Does anybody want to share, did they have a really positive experience with how money was brought up or talked about in your household? Anybody want to share in the chat, like what's one thing that you remembered about talking about money in your family? You'd be willing to share?
I
I can
will.
share that. Yeah, go ahead.
So it was very interesting because we often heard, my siblings and I, lists of things not to do with money, but I didn't hear a lot of proactive advice on how to actually spend the money or plan to use it or invest it.
That's a good point. Same here. It was more like money was um, meant to be saved, but then I'm like, but so like, what about how do I spend it though? Like, and so that was as a young adult, that's what I ran into. It's like they didn't teach me about the wise use of credit cards or things like that. And so um, the message in my family was, you shouldn't spend more than you have, and debt is a bad thing. But I didn't really have any practical skills about how do I actually manage money. Um, oh, that's nice. Your parents split your money into. Wow, that's amazing. I never had that in my household. And so, you'll see that with it, and you could have the same people, you could have siblings and be in the same household, and you could have gotten very different messages about money in your family. So it's also like a personality thing. And so that's very interesting to hear. Not much education on credit cards. Yeah, same. I'm an immigrant I immigrated with my family, and the banking and money system was very different than it was in Italy. So, which kind of goes to, I'm jumping to the third question, but my parents just assumed that everything I needed to know about money in the United States, I was going to learn at school. And as we know, that's not really true. I mean, now in high school, there's one semester in Utah of financial literacy that's required, and that's one of the few states in the US that requires it. But I just feel that learning about money from a young age is such an important life skill that we can build, and we can build positive messages around money, no matter how little or how much money you make. And so I was just also curious to know how many of you thought that teaching children about money is difficult. So we're kind of split on this one. But yeah, if it's like, if we don't know, if we don't have the skills, sometimes you feel like, well, how can I teach somebody else about how to deal with money? Money doesn't come for free. Money doesn't come for free from parents who worked and did random jobs to save for things we wanted. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Okay, so a little bit of nerdy research I wanted to share with you, that there was a study conducted by T. Rowe Price that said only 40% of parents trust school teachers to teach their children about money. And at the same time, 58% of those parents reported talking with their children about money. They only talked about it once a month or less. And then there was a Jumpstart study showed that even after it became a requirement for high school students to take a personal finance course, a majority of students' quizzes, they still flunked about a basic personal finances. So this just goes to show that I think relying on schools to teach kids about finances isn't enough, because it's something that we're dealing with. It's not like a one-time conversation and then we're done. It's something that goes on throughout life. And then that same study that said 40% of parents that were polled said they often miss opportunities to talk about money with their kids because they don't know what the best ways to do it are or how to bring it up. So some of the information that I share with you today, hopefully if you're in that boat, will help you feel a little bit more empowered about how to bring up this subject when in involving kids in the money conversations. So do we think that children are born with a money sense? How many of you, just give me a yes or no in the chat. Do you think children are just inherently born with a money sense? Okay, I'm gonna split here. One says no, one says yes. So actually, children are really not born with a money sense. Your daughter thinks you could just buy anything. Yeah, I remember that when my son was little. So what they do is they learn from what they see, what they hear, what they experience, and that's why also it can be unique for even siblings in the same household. The messages that we receive might be different. They're going to learn from mistakes. They're going to learn from successes. And as a parent, you're teaching your children every day, not just by what you say, but what you do and how they feel. So personal finance expert and author, you may have heard about her, Rachel Cruz, reminds us in one of her books to parents on a regular basis that when it comes to money, more is caught than taught. So if there's a contentious discussion in the household about money, I know that was this case in my family. So for me, money was kind of like a bad, evil thing. Like it was always uncomfortable when it was brought up in my family. So just keep this in mind as we go out throughout the webinar today, that it's not about being perfect with money and being perfect about teaching children and family members about money, but we hope that you'll just feel empowered to play an active role in this important, I think, part of education for a child's life. So our first objective, let's talk about how do we set goals as a family. And I like this quote from Paula Pant. She's an author, and she's been pretty popular in social media. She's a personal finance expert, and she says, "We can afford anything, but we can't afford everything." And so what that means is it's about priorities. Like unless money is, unless you're Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos and money is no object, there's just infinite amount. It's really about prioritizing, like what's important to you. So what is your why? So with setting goals, especially when it comes to money, It starts with knowing and explaining the why. Why can't we buy this thing today? And I would always say to my son, instead of saying no, I would say the reason why we can't buy this today is because remember, we're saving for that family vacation, or this is how much we have set aside for this thing. But ask me next month, and then we can talk about. And so that starts to give him a little bit of insight as to why you're making the decisions, why it might be yes, why it might be no. And then having that why, it's like, not, I'm not just saying no to be mean or to say no or to make you sad, but it's because we have these other things that we talked about as a family that's more important, or we set limits to do a certain amount of can spend a certain amount. And I think that's really helpful. And I see now that as a teenager, my son has picked up all those messages. And when I say we can't do that right now, but let's look at it for next month, he understands. And I'm not just saying no, it's because there's an overarching goal of why we spend money the way we spend. So when you are setting goals as a family, it's great as age appropriate to get everyone involved. And so they're all on the same track and you all know what you're working towards. So making sure that there is a specific value and a purpose behind why you're setting goals. So you can talk about what your family values are. It's really important that our family makes a trip once a year to go visit grandma and grandpa in southern Utah, something like that, whatever is important to your family. And then just keeping in mind that we don't have financial goals, we have goals with financial consequences. If you think about all of the big things that life goals, when we think about, I don't know, maybe it was getting your education, getting married, paying for a wedding, buying a car, going on a dream vacation, going to Disneyland. Usually those big life goals, the goals that we have financial consequences to them. So thinking about what can each member of your family do to help, like having the conversation. What would you like, to do as a family trip this year? Or, giving people accountability and age appropriate, how they can be involved in setting those goals. So for example, what can each member of your family do to help? You can say, okay, maybe we save, one child's going to save some of their gift money that they get, or working extra hours, or maybe doing yard work for neighbors, babysitting, selling things around the house, toys. I did that with my son, like toys that we weren't playing with. We were able to sell some of those things and help put money towards a vacation, things like that. And just be careful when you are setting timelines for family goals. It's going to be based on the age members of the family, and you want it to be challenging and keep everybody motivated. So maybe you have your younger kids, you might want to set a long-term goal and then have these like little milestones, like you celebrate along the way, and something, especially with kids, something visual, like we had like one of those giant Post-it notes, and we wrote our goal, and then we filled in the color when we got to the goal. And that was just, every time my son put money in the jar for whatnot, like just reinforcing those positive and celebrating those milestones. Because sometimes, especially for long-term goals, it's hard to just think about it if you're not getting those visual cues and those reinforcements that keep you motivated and make you want to stay on track. So you could take a few minutes every month, like a designated time. I know in my family, I have older kids. We do, with my immediate family, because I've got some kids that are out of the house, we do Money Mondays, and I'm teaching my son how to budget. And then once a month, we do Investment Wednesdays, where the older kids come over with their spouses, and we talk about different topics regarding investing. And so we just make some time dedicated. It can be 5 minutes, it can be 10 minutes. But just talking about it and evaluate your progress. And then, let's have a treat or a reward because we did such a great job, or this isn't working well. Maybe we need to readjust some goals. And so those can be some things that you can think about. And I would definitely set a time limit if you're going to have family meetings or have a discussion, especially if you have really young ones. Their attention span is not going to be very long. So I would definitely recommend you set 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever. Maybe it's a 5-minute check-in. And I think that makes it easier to stick to, and it doesn't feel so overwhelming and like a drudgery. So I want to give you some money principles to talk about, how to get kids motivated. So how can parents encourage their kids to save money? Because I think saving money is just a great habit that all people, no matter what age or stage you are, we should always have something set aside for our goals, for a rainy day fund, for our future. So um, you can think about talking about a want versus a need. It's okay to want something, but understanding what's the difference. Candy, I want to buy this candy bar. Well, that's great. You want to buy it. Is it something that we need right now? We've already met our food budget for this week, things like that. And then giving them opportunities to earn money. I know when my son was little, pick up your toys. That was, 10 cents, 50 cents. As he got older, the chores got a little bit more complex. And then, Mom, I need some money. I really want to buy this game. Okay, well, here's some things that you can do. And we agreed on what the prices are. If you want to wash mom or dad's car, I'll give you $3. If you want to vacuum the inside, if you want to detail it, if you want to cut the grass or things. And then as he got older, those tasks became more complex, and he had an opportunity to earn money if he wanted to. And then setting savings goals together. You can offer savings incentives. I do this now with my son as a teenager. He actually got a job. He works at the school as a student janitor. And so he works 2 hours a day, 8 hours a week. And said, you can actually open a Roth IRA now that you have earned income. And so we talked about, like, what do you want to save for your long term? What do you want to save for? Mom, I want to buy a car. I want to be able to have my own car when I'm going to be 16 or 17. And so we talk about, okay, well, if this is how much you want to save, this is how much you have to save every month. And got him set up with a checking account, with a savings account. So, walking him through how do we do that? And I also had a matching program. I said, if you're going to put money into your IRA or in your savings account, I'll match you dollar for dollar up to 5% or whatnot. And that gives them the encouragement and seeing that, he's getting some incentive to save, because it's really about creating habits. This is what really setting goals and following through. It's just about creating habits, and he's going to create a habit that he always knows that he should save some part of his spending, whether it's $1, whether it's 1%, whether it's 10%. We're creating habits of, it becomes automatic. I'm always going to save part of my paycheck. And then leaving room for mistakes. Sometimes the natural consequences are the best things, or if they don't make the best decisions, it's okay. It's better to learn them now. My son said, I only have like $2 in my checking account because I bought this game. And I was like, but I want to buy this other thing. I said, well, sometimes when you say yes to something, you're going to have to say no to something else. Like we can afford anything, but not everything. Right. And so he's understanding that, you have to make choices and you have to prioritize what's important for you. And then just setting a good example. It just, he certainly knows that we are not perfect with money. And we discuss things with him and mistakes that we've made as appropriate, to just say, I want him to do better than what I did. I didn't have these tools. I didn't have these conversations. And this has just been really, really important as part of his upbringing. And maybe because I work in personal finance and I'm kind of a money nerd, I do wish that I would have had more conversations about money when I was younger with my family, that I had opportunity to learn. A lot of times with money, it's like you just learn as you go. You make mistakes, and then you hope that you do better. So just a few tips about, as you talk to your kids about money, when you talk to them is less important than it is, I think, about how you talk to them about money, and just doing it in age appropriate ways. Start with what you know and what you do. And then giving them consistent opportunities to earn, if that's something that if they set a savings goal, always having opportunities to be able, it doesn't have to be a lot of money. And then I think it's good to let just kids in on the basic financial picture. They don't have to know everything. If discussions about income and goals are kept cheerful and open, These conversations can be more informative for kids and not feel so stressful. And then teaching kids about quality versus quantity, allowing them to make some age appropriate money decisions. Otherwise, they're not going to really learn anything if they don't have the opportunity to make their own choices. In other words, try to be mindful of not making all their decisions for them, but having them make decisions and then see the consequences of, did they think that was a good decision? Did they think that was maybe was a better, something different or a better decision? And I'm going to share I've got some free resources that I can email out after the fact. There's some free downloads that can help you, just some basics about how to teach kids about money and how to have those conversations and little mini lessons, if that's something that you're interested in doing. I can share those with you. So just overall, I think the benefits of setting goals and budgeting as a family, I think it makes kids more resourceful. I think it builds confidence in them. It helps them understand reality and makes them more knowledgeable just about the marketplace and how money works. I think it encourages them to be independent. It gives them tools that as they grow, they can be financially independent as adults. And then there's going to be an increased success because everybody's interested in working towards the same goals. Everybody can pitch in, everybody can be accountable and motivate each other. And the overarching theme with teaching kids about money is teaching them to be financially independent and financially literate adults. So let's move on to, does anybody have any questions or comments about setting goals as a family and teaching kids about, how to have the money conversation? So let's talk about our second objective, which is my favorite budgeting hack of all time is revolving savings. Has anybody ever heard of revolving savings? Be curious to know. Is this brand new for all of you? Some of you. This was something that I didn't learn until just a few years ago, but I absolutely love this strategy. Okay, Eric, you've heard about it. So, what it is a strategic budgeting tool to help you save for expected irregular expenses. So can anybody share with me what is an example of an expected irregular expense? What's something that you're going to be spending money on this year, but it's irregular because it doesn't happen every single month? Oil changes. Yep. Swim lessons. Summer stuff. Yep. Christmas, anybody? Yep. So we know if you celebrate Christmas and you buy gifts, it's December 25th every single year, right? Or maybe you don't pay your car insurance every month and you pay it once a year or twice a year. Sometimes they give you a break on your car insurance if you paid in big chunks. Birthdays, if you celebrate Mother's Day, Father's Day, anniversaries, things like that, right? So these are things that you can look down the year and say, okay, I know this is coming up. Tuition, excellent example. And it's a strategic way to save for things throughout the year so that if you have a month that's kind of heavy where you have a lot of things hitting you, it doesn't derail your whole month. And I'll give you an example of how you would start. So you start with writing down, and I would say if you're new to this, maybe just pick your top 3 things that you know that you really want to set aside money for, because it hits you, like car registration. Like I know in my family, we have 2 in 1 month, and that's kind of like a big hit for us. So that's something I definitely try to spread out. I only pay it once a year, but I'm spreading it out throughout the year. So what you would do is you want to write down irregular expected monthly expenses, and you can look down like from February to next February or the rest of the year. And then you divide that number, you add it up, and you total it and you divide it by 12 months or how many times you get paid in a month. So you can do it by paycheck, you can do it by month. Um, here's what it looks like. So this person, they have a more extensive list. They have birthdays, Christmas, car registration, etc. And so as you can see here, they do a family vacation in July, which they expect to spend. It's $500. So that's kind of a heavy month. Back to school, maybe there's registration, sports, things like that. So that's kind of a, July and August are kind of heavy months. And then we see November and December, with Thanksgiving and the holidays. But then we have these other months where there's really nothing, irregular happening. And so you add everything up across all of your rows, and then you get your total in the column, and you come with $2,240. Now you don't have to have such an extensive list, but you divide that, in this case, the person divided it by 12. And so every month you have $186 that you are setting aside in a I would recommend a designated, specific, separate account for revolving savings. And the reason why it's called revolving savings is you think of a revolving door. Money's going in and money's coming out. Money's going in, money's coming out. Unlike emergency savings where we just kind of park it and we hope we don't have to touch it, but it's there if we need it. Typically we're not, hopefully, if you're not having a lot of emergencies. And so what happens is when you have those months that it's a kind of a higher month, you've had a lot of time to kind of save up for it, and you go in and dip and pay for that thing without it having to be like having to come up with all this money at the same time. And if you're having like, oh, I don't remember what I spent on X, Y, or Z, like just go back and look at your bank statements or your credit card statements and just see like, okay, what did we spend exactly on school stuff last year? And then that can give you an indication, or you can just set limits. You can say our budget for vacation, summer vacation is $500. And you can also do it that way, but the same thing with like birthdays or Christmas. Some of the other things are fixed, like car registration is usually not something that, or oil changes, we kind of have a better idea. So I love this tool. It really helped me immensely to just making a point. I have it in my budget. It's a line item. It's revolving savings. And in this case, every month. And the other key is automating. I automatically have $186 going into when I get paid, going in from my checking account, going to a revolving savings. Oftentimes you can even start from your paycheck. You ask your HR payroll person to have a certain amount automatically going from your paycheck into a savings account. You're just removing a barrier to saving. And that way it's out of sight, out of mind. It gets taken off at the top. And oftentimes you'll get used to not having that money. And then when you need it, it's just sitting in there in that savings account. So this is just one of my favorite budgeting hacks that I only learned about recently. So just some tips for success with using revolving savings. I mentioned earlier, setting up automated transfers. For me, being successful with savings personally, automating it has really been the key for me. I'm having it taken out at the top instead of hoping there's something left over at the end of the month. I just make it a priority. I have it as a line item, and you can have it as a line item in your budget. How do you fund a revolving savings account? Maybe, you've got some things coming down pretty quickly and you don't have that much to save for it. Well, it's tax time. You can think about maybe using some of your tax refund to jumpstart a revolving savings account. Maybe not all of it, but maybe some of it. You're just going to say, I'm going to put X amount in this savings account, and that's going to jumpstart my revolving savings. You can look at, I don't know if for those of you that do budget, I know that I budget a certain amount for my utilities, and some months I spend less than what I budgeted. So for example, if I said I was going to spend $80 on electricity this month and I only spend $50, I actually take that $30 and I move it out of my checking account and I put it in revolving savings because I budgeted for it and I planned for it. And I planned that I was going to have $80 to pay for that. But if it didn't happen, then I get to make the choice and say, I can either leave it as a cushion in my budget, or I can move it out and put it into revolving savings. So that's another way to jumpstart a revolving savings. And then I also use cashback rewards. So I have a card that gives me back 1.5%. And then when I see that cash sitting, it's not earning any money sitting with the credit card, I just move that. And I actually have a fund called Alaska Fund because that's one of my savings goals. And so every time there's cash sitting in there from rewards, I just sweep it out and I move it into my Alaska Fund that I hope to be able to go there in a couple of years. So those are just strategies to think about how to, jumpstart, especially if things are tight and you're not sure how you're going to make room for those. But it really will alleviate a lot of that stress and a lot of that panic of having to come up with something that we knew it was coming down the road, but we forgot about it. So that's my absolute favorite budgeting hack is revolving savings. Does anybody have any questions about revolving savings? And while you think about that, if you have questions, you can put it in the chat. You can unmute yourself. But I also use online savings accounts. And you'll find that if you put your money in an online savings account, you get a lot better interest. Like one of my accounts, I'm earning almost 5%. And I'll pop in the chat a great place to do some research on how to open an online savings account. I like to go to bankrate.com. It's a great place to start and do research about how to find online savings accounts. And you just would have your regular checking account linked to this online savings account. And then you just transfer either money from your checking to your online, or you can have money directly going from your paycheck to your online savings account. I have a free account. I don't have to have a minimum balance. I don't pay monthly fees. It's FDIC insured. My money is safe up to $250,000. I don't have an ATM card for my online savings account. And the reason why they're able to pay a lot more interest is because they don't have physical brick and mortar. So they don't have all these overhead costs. I've been doing it for many years. I love it. And it's just a way for our money to earn a little bit more. Because a regular brick and mortar bank, if you check, might be earning like 0.01%, which is 0.1%. And so it's just an opportunity. If it's money that's going to be sitting in there anyway for a goal, why not have it earn a little bit extra in interest? Okay, so let's jump into our last objective, talking about just some tools to help. If you're thinking about you want to cut back expenses, whether it's to free up money for other things or other goals, a couple of things that, some strategies. One is called the step down principle. Has anybody heard about the step down principle? I'm curious to know. So that was something that was also new to me. It was actually developed by a USU professor that teaches personal finance. It's a topic about how to step down in spending. Has anybody heard of that? Oh, I'm going to explain what it is. I was just curious to see if anybody had heard about it. And then okay, you've heard of it, can't remember it. Okay, great. And then cutting expenses booklet. I'm gonna share with you a free resource that you can download on our on USU finance.usu.edu website. So step down principle. So what that is, it's just a way to help you decrease some expenses and free up a little bit of money without having to completely give up things that you like. Essentially, how this works is you pick a variable category of your budget that you want to decrease your spending in. So let's say going out to eat. And you figure out a way of either enjoying going out to eat, either by doing it in a less expensive way, like where you eat, or cutting back on the frequency of when you do something. So by modifying spending habits gradually through the step down principle, it can make the changes you make a little bit more sustainable. It's like saying, I want to lose 10 pounds and I'm going to cut out everything that's I think is bad for me out of my, and I'm not going to be able to eat any of the things that I like to eat. I'm just going to eat rice cakes and, whatever. So by making those kind of really like cold turkey big cuts, they're usually not sustainable because we feel like we're depriving ourselves too much. So the step down principle is kind of a gradual way to tweak. Like, let's say I like to grab lunch when I'm at work during the week, Monday through Friday, and I run over and I'll spend $12 or $15 instead of bringing home from lunch. Well, maybe I say, I do enjoy going out to eat at lunchtime. I like to get out of the office. I like to get some fresh air, but maybe I do it 3 times a week. Maybe I just do it Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then Tuesday, Thursday, I bring a home lunch. So you get how this works. So you're not completely cutting out everything, and you can choose how much you want to cut out. you don't have to go all the way down the stairs in order to see any savings or adjustments. So you get to decide. You have a little bit of, and so this can be helpful. And I would say being intentional. If I normally spend $50 a week on grabbing lunch during the week, and I say I'm going to only spend 30, I'm going to budget $20 to go in my revolving savings account or in some other category that I either need to have more money in because it's too tight, or I want to save for something. And that's going to help you be even more successful. So just to give you another visual about, you know, we were talking about going out to eat. Maybe instead of 3 times a week, it's 2 times. Maybe it's 1 time. Or maybe if I go out to eat, maybe I just get dessert and something to drink. Or if you want to, you know, cut it all out and say, well, this month we're just gonna make, maybe we can go out to eat, but maybe we don't have dessert. We just have dessert at home. So there's lots of ways to be successful with this. And really it's like eliminating part of the experience without having to sacrifice all the enjoyment. Because if you sacrifice all the enjoyment, it's really hard to stick to a budget or a spending plan or reach your goals if you just don't make it fun at all. It's just not, you're not going to stick to it, and it's not going to be sustainable. So that's the step down principle. And some of you might already be doing this, you know, and even realize that, oh yeah, I do the step down principle. I I don't go to the movies on premiere night on a Friday night. I wait till it gets to the dollar theater, or I go see a matinee. Those are all ways to step down where you still get to see that movie that you want to see, but you find a way to do it a little bit less expensively. So now this is the other free tool that I wanted to share with you, called the Cutting Expenses Guidebook. And this was actually developed by my team, the Empowering Financial Wellness team. And we put together some ideas about applying that step down principle and freeing up money that you can put towards goals. And so we know that we've talked about that drastic changes in spending habits, research has shown in the long term have really high failure rates. So, but if you strategically plan your changes with these goals that you have in mind, you'll see that you can make lifestyle changes based on how drastic. So the red section is things that you really need to come up with a lot of savings. Those are pretty, drastic savings where you have drastic measures where you have like no savings or little savings, or you've got a short-term goal, or maybe you're struggling to pay your bills. Those are kind of the more hardcore ideas that you can implement. And then we get to yellow, a little bit less aggressive ideas to boost savings. And these are all the contents. These are all the different categories that they give you ideas, like with whether it's clothing or entertainment. And, some of these you may have thought before, but I felt this was helpful to kind of put some things in your mind and do a little brainstorm. It's like, some people say to me, Vincenza, I've tried everything that I could think of. I don't know what else to do. And then it's like, well, here, just look through this. And maybe there's some things you hadn't thought about, either talking to other people or just reading other ideas. Sometimes that can give us some ideas for how we could do things differently. So this is a great resource. You can scan the QR code. You can go to our website, finance.usu.edu. You can also find it there. So it's just a great resource to help you build savings and just maybe cut some expenses, even if it's just temporarily. We've had a lot of inflation, especially Utah's been pretty hard hit with things just being more expensive. So this could be some ways to give you some ideas to how to cut back a little bit to make room for those other things that we'd like to spend more money on, or we'd like to have more money to spend on. And so just some tips to walk away with using the step down principle. We talked about you can make gradual changes that will be more sustainable. And then using the Cutting Expenses Guidebook, maybe it could just help you brainstorm some ideas. And that's a great one too, that you could involve the whole family in talking about what are some ways that we could cut back on certain things so that we can save for this other thing that we agreed that we'd like to do as a family. And then anytime you decrease an expense, be intentional about taking that amount, even if it's $5, and putting it towards whichever goal that you're talking about, that you're trying to achieve. Because it's great to cut back expenses, but if we don't make that step and say, okay, I cut back on this so that I could do this other thing, just being intentional about and rewarding yourself for, okay, this is what I did. I ate out, 3 times less this month, and this is how much I saved versus last month. So guess what? That's going into my savings account to go on my dream vacation or my summer vacation or whatnot. So those are ways to be really successful with reaping the rewards literally of you making those sacrifices and then having something to show for it. Okay, anybody have any questions, comments about what we talked about today before we wrap things up? Okay, so all this that we talked about, what's the so what? So ideally, I hope that you understood that, you know, the communicating the family finance goals to really get everybody's buy-in, and, you know, talking about it in an age appropriate way, what's comfortable for your family, how much you're willing to share, and really working towards a communal goal will just get everybody's buy-in, and there'll be a lot less griping. And at least I found that in my family about why can't we do this? Why can't we buy that? Keeping those things like in the conversation and top of mind really help get everybody's buy-in. And then we can really be strategic about cutting those expenses or being mindful of what we spend in certain areas and setting limits so that we can, you know, we can do more things to fulfill whatever our goals are. Like, you know, it seems like summer is really far away, but we were just talking before at the beginning, like, wow, it's February 1st today. But, you know, it feels like January is really long, but then all of a sudden it went by really fast. And here we are, pretty soon we'll be talking about Christmas again. So yeah, summer feels like it's far away, but really it's just a few months away. And then teaching children about money, I think it helps them, and I think it helps us too, because anytime you have to teach something, I found as a personal finance educator, you have to learn a lot about it in order to be able to teach it. So I think it's an opportunity for us as adults to even pick up some skills and to learn more things, to explain something to somebody else. And then now what? So I love to leave folks with some action items, some things you can be thinking about doing, like all this information that you've received. And I'm happy to share a copy of the presentation. I know that there will be a recording, but also like you to walk away with some tangible things and strategies and tools that you could take. So I encourage you, if you don't already have a revolving savings account, start one today. Put a little bit of money in there. If you're expecting a tax refund, start planning for how you're going to spend that tax refund. Maybe put it into a revolving savings account. If you name it, you'll also be more successful. If you're going to call it revolving savings account, if you're going to call it our Disneyland fund or your Hawaii fund or whatever your goals are, you will be more excited about reaching that goal and less likely to steal from that if you give it a name. And then download the cutting expenses booklet if you want to, you know, go online and look at it and just get some ideas, talk about it with your family. And then there are a lot of free resources out there for teaching kids about money. If you need something to help out, if you go to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's website, and if you search Money as You Grow or just Google CFPB Money as You Grow resource, that's a great free downloadable resource that helps you teach kids, like, have age appropriate ways. It breaks it down by age, how to talk to kids about money. And so I can include all of these links in a follow-up email. I'll share it, and then it can be passed on to those that might be interested in having those resources. So I want to thank everybody for joining me today, and I need and love to have your feedback. This program is brought to you by grant funding, and one of the reasons why we get to do what we do and do it for free and continue to do the important work that we think we're doing in the community is to get feedback from you. So I'd really appreciate it if you could scan this QR code. It's just a few questions to give us some feedback about what your experience was and what you're learning. And if you do so, as a thank you, I think I have a copy here. We have this great finance calendar, which is a resource. I'm going to pull it up here. It's printed on really nice stock paper. It is a free download, but if you fill out the survey and if you give us your information on how we can get this to you, it's a finance calendar. I love it because it gives you tips every month about what you can be doing, and you can check it off. Like last month was choose a money word, consider a zero-based budget, and explains how to do that. It gives you resources, even tips every month about investing. And so it's printed on really nice cardstock paper, and I just keep it on my desk, and it helps me keep things top of mind and some tips on what to be thinking about throughout the year. So if you fill out the survey, we'll send you a really nice printed copy of the finance calendar as a thank you for giving us your thoughts about today's webinar. And another new thing that we're doing some free budget mastermind classes throughout the state of Utah. We just did our last one in Kaysville last month. We sold out. It was really successful. It's free. We give you lunch. It's just an all-day session on how to actually make a budget, how to track expenses with the whole Empowering Financial Wellness team. We're doing them in Provo. We're looking at doing one in Logan in the spring. We're doing one in St. George. And then this one is in Salt Lake next week. So if you're interested, or share with somebody that you think might be interested, please have them go to our Eventbrite. That's how you can register for them for free. And just, you can either go on Eventbrite and just look for Empowering Financial Wellness. And then you'll see all of our events. If you go to finance.usu.edu, you can see everything that we're doing in the community, and everything we do is totally free. So we encourage you to check it out. We have weekly webinars also that we teach that are free every Tuesday, Thursday. And if you're not following us already, we'd love a follow at Utah Money Moms. We put a lot of great tips and blog posts just about all things personal finance to just help us with that thing that we all have to deal with, money. So thanks everybody for joining me today. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.